Welcome, everybody, to the next Inclusion Starts Now podcast. And today we're going to talk about Wicked. I finally saw it. I cannot believe how long it took me to see it. I've seen it live a couple of times, but wow, the movie was insane. And of course, I took notes the entire time as I was at a matinee and nobody was near me. Um, so I'm just going to go over my notes and we're just going to talk about it. Oh, I guess the this episode is sponsored by popcorn. And when people at movie theaters only put half in and then put butter and then put the other half in, that's not what the person did for me today. And I saved some of my popcorn for the end to go put more butter on it. But that is besides the point. I am going off on a tangent. Thank you, popcorn, for being so enjoyable during movies. Okay. So a lot of it was like lyrics of the song that just hit me. And of course, as we know, like the theme of Wicked is like, what is wicked? And in the one of the lyrics to the first song says like Wicked dies alone. And I know that there's already been a lot of people talking about like, who is ending up alone? Is it Alphaba or Glinda? Or Galinda. I'm not really quite sure what to say as she changes her name throughout the movie. But but talking about like and this is something I've talked a lot about with like religion and with ableism and how people treat people. Like how do we identify what's good and bad? How do we identify the morals? How like do we identify as a morally good person or a morally bad? I don't know who would say that they're a morally bad person, but how do we decipher these areas in our life? And then a question that they have like throughout the show or the movie when they talk about the wizard, everyone talks about how the wizard will give you like what your heart's desire is. And so it really made me reflect because like throughout Alphaba's journey, she kind of starts with like her desire is to be the same, that she doesn't want the green skin. She wants her skin to be like everybody else's. And she doesn't want to be so different. But then once she gets to the wizard, it changes. And she's like, I want animals to be free with all of us. Why are we sticking them in cages now? And, uh, and it was like such a beautiful transition of showing what you feel like your desire is until like those boundaries get tested and you're like, I've always been green and like look at how awesome I am, but look at these bigger problems than like me being green. So yeah. So I want and so it had me thinking about like, if there was this magical wizard, what is like that one thing that I would want? And I know that there's been other big things where people are like, oh, I don't know, world peace, where God, what movie is that? I cannot remember, but it's where a person is like, what's your one wish? And they're like, I don't know, world peace. And they're like, no, a wish for yourself. And so then whatever their wish for their self was like very tied into their community and like their family. And I really can't remember what it was, but it's like an interesting. I don't know. It had me reflecting on my own heart's desire. And I'm thankfully in a place where I feel like I do get to talk about like inclusive practices a lot and just keep spreading love and education however I can. And family is a huge like heart's desire to me. And that these like the things that are so important to me are things that I do try really hard to do. I do also understand that I have the privilege to be able to stay home with my kids, but yeah, it's hard thinking about what my own heart's desire could be if I could change something because I would think that it would be, how do we get rid of like segregation of everyone? How could we encourage people to get educated? But we'll talk about education being power towards the end because I know that is very much how I felt once. Yeah. Oh my gosh, so good. Another line was, I'm so sorry that you've been forced to live with this. Okay, so when Galinda is talking to Alphaba, she says, I'm so sorry that you've been forced to live with this. I'm going to major in sorcery to try to fix you. And everyone's saying, ah. And the whole scene is just makes me think about how the medical field a lot of times is all about, how they're going to fix people. How are we going to, this disability is a problem. So how can we fix you so it's not a problem? When to a lot of disabled people, their disability is not a problem. But how, like, all of the people in Galinda's life just, they're like, oh, you're so amazing. Like, what a kind heart. Like, and I feel like you see that so much with special ed teachers or parents with kids with disabilities or people who are, I mean, I remember I would babysit a child, like children with disabilities, and people all the time would come up to me and just be like, "Thank you so much for what you do." Like, "Oh, you have a heart of gold." And I was just always so taken aback by it. But what really bothers me like with this too is like, you could be like this. Instead of telling me that I'm such a great person, like you can also be a great person and you can just treat people fairly. Like you can just treat kids with disabilities like kids. Um, and, understand their differences and like be okay with accommodations and like, live together. Uh, so I thought that scene was just done so well. And then um Alphaba, is like kind of just like is like, no, get away from me. But then when Glinda goes back to her friends, she's like, I don't understand. Like, wasn't I being a good person? Like, wasn't I doing the right thing? And again, that's like this great example of just people being like, they're behaving how they think that they're supposed to behave instead of behaving how like the person would like your support. Um, and And just like how much we are swayed by our community and our peers, and how much, I don't know, just like how much I guess, just how important it is that we surround ourselves with people um, of just diversity, like not just people who are like your minions or something. Like, I just feel like, oh my gosh, where am I going with this? Just this idea of like she wants to look good. And so she's like checking with the people who look up to her, like, I'm being good, right? Instead of this like genuinely trying to do good for other people. Um, oh, I wanted to look up this quote and I'm gonna look it up right now. And okay, this was like all the intro scene of like them getting to school. So a lot happened in this part of the movie. Um, but there is a quote from Professor Marvel. Yeah, it was Professor Marvel. And so she says, magic is the mind's way of trying to understand what it can't explain. So much behavior is based off of like how we respond to other people. Oh gosh, I don't even know what to say about this. Magic is its mind. I just love that quote. I really wish I could say something like so beautiful about it. I mean, I guess it could be like a very overarching theme to Wicked that, when our minds are trying to like categorize things a lot, and so when things are so different from what we're expecting, um, or different and we don't know much about it, that our brain is trying to make something up. Our brain's trying to figure it out. So I like that they said this because it was like it was it's said by a person who's not necessarily like a good person in the book movie, but it's a really good thought process. Like it's a really good thing to think about like that our brains are constantly working, and when there's like a threat to like where we are, what we're doing, like, well, that's different, is that weird, like what's the social norm, how do we feel with our peers, like there's so many revolving areas that we're like trying to figure out how to how to respond to people around us and to our community and I guess sometimes it's just magically. Okay. And this also made me think about representation. Because I was very impressed with the disability representation as the people who used wheelchairs are actors who use wheelchairs, um, which was so great. And there were some other characters just like throughout the movie that um, had disabilities. So that was really cool. Um, but it also made me think about this movie, Harvey Milk. Well, like the person Harvey Milk, but he had that movie. I think it was just called Milk. I can't remember. Um, but there was like a move that they made where he told all of his community to call your friends and call your family and tell them that you're gay to let them know that like there's someone that they love that identifies as this minority group and in hopes that it will change people's minds to be like, look, this isn't some group you know nothing about. It's your son, it's your nephew, it's your, whoever. These are the people in your life that are identifying this way, and their rights are being threatened. So, how do we make sure that everybody understands that, like, we're all living among each other? And so, how can we instead focus on being inclusive instead of exclusive? And it also made me think a lot about how how did I think about this? I wrote it down, but I really don't remember why I wrote this down. But I wanted to talk about how how cute kids can get away with stuff. And and I don't know if this is going to ruffle feathers or something, but this is for disabled children and non-disabled children that when they are to the average eye, I guess, they can get away with more stuff and they get treated better. Um, and this is something I've seen as a teacher and as a parent. And and I was feeling this way because of Glinda, that she was treated in in such a specific way all of her life that once somebody was like telling her no or was fighting against her and wasn't just like groveling to her feet, that like she literally didn't know what to do. And that's something that she battles with throughout the entire movie. So being aware that like kids who might not be in that standard of cuteness from societal norms, like make sure that they that we are there to support everybody and try to see those underlying biases you might have and really thinking about, like where did they come from? What happened like with them growing up? And that's how I felt a lot with Elphaba, that, her dad didn't love her and was upset, was constantly saying that she was a menace and not doing things right. And it was the animals who were taking care of her. And so she grew this huge bond to all these animals that were now being put into cages. Um, and had all these, like the bottle that she had under her pillow and just like certain things that meant so much to her because she never got that love from her dad. I mean, that's like a huge, real psychological thing that is traumatic for children to experience, not having this unconditional love from their father. And I mean, it's just like a reminder to people that like, that kid that's being really hard or just, seeming like they're just a really mean kid, they're not mean. They're trying to communicate something that they don't have the words yet to communicate. And we as adults, I really feel like need to um really learn about that child. Show them unconditional love. As a teacher, that is what I did for all students. It didn't matter how mean you were, it didn't matter if you hit, it didn't matter what kind of behaviors you had. I was going to keep showing up for that child, and I promise you that no child like ever said they didn't like that. Um, and if any, I mean, it really is what children need. They need that unconditional love. They need those people in their life that are going to be there no matter what and support them. Even when their behavior isn't good, or isn't what you want it to be. Whew. Okay. The love interest comes in, and I just cannot remember his name because I usually call him something else, but it's kind of a spoiler alert to part two, so I'm not going to say it. Um, he's the prince. Oh my gosh, why do I not? Okay. Uh, one of his lines is those who don't try never look foolish. And I love his character development throughout the movies. Or sorry, I'm saying movies like I've seen the second one. I I just love his character development because, yeah, he starts off as like dancing through life. I don't care what's happening. I'm gonna do my own thing. I'll, be who I want. I break the rules. And it's another great example of a guy who looks great. He's cute. He can communicate to people. He knows how to act the way that society wants him to act, kind of, but then he like can twist the law, like bend the rules enough to where he's like the likable bad boy. And I mean, I guess I can't really say much about his because I don't want to do super spoiler alerts if you've never seen Wicked. Um, but I mean, it goes against everything that I say with like Adam Grant's Think Again of like, you want to look foolish. It's good to look foolish. It's good to mess up and it's good to learn from that. And we can't do that if we're just trying to do what society wants us to do. All the subtle disability things is something else I want to talk about. I love how one of the big issues at the beginning is that one of the teachers is trying to push Nessa's chair without her consent. And she's trying to say no. And, she's getting frustrated, but then Elphaba, gets super mad and like everything gets like flown up in the air. And and then Nessa kind of gets mad at Elphaba because she's like, dude, let me do it. Like, it's something that I feel like happens so often to people in the disabled community that even when they want to stick up for themselves, they have family and friends and people who care about them who are also trying to stand up for them. But when people step in too much, then you're not letting someone advocate for themselves. And it's kind of like that Bingo, Bluey episode where Bingo needs to work on her big girl bark. And it's like, no one's going to learn to advocate for themselves if people keep advocating for them instead. And yeah, I just thought it was so great. And I love how Bach, the love interest for Nessa, is like when he goes to be like, let's dance, that he like puts his hand out for her and then she like grabs his hand. Like he doesn't just push her wheelchair out to the dance floor. And and I love that like when everyone's talking, like they're just talking to her. Like it's not like they bend down and they're like, "Hey, how are you doing?" Which I think is really interesting because I'm sure a lot of people with disabilities like see themselves in Alphaba as like, everyone's staring at you. They're not respecting your boundaries. They're not like, they don't think that you're smart. Like so much, I felt like there was so much ableism that I could see with like how they were treating um Alphaba when like there also was ableism. I mean, there was actual ableism towards Nessa, but it's like a minor portion of the movie. I don't know. I don't feel like I'm explaining that well, but here we go. I just saw it. We're fresh out of sitting through a 3-hour movie that I was like ready to sit for like 6 more hours. Um, but yeah, it's just there was a lot of great quotes and just like lessons of ableism and racism. And I also really like that they made like dancing through life, the prince, that they kind of like made him bi. Um, which like I don't know if that was intentional, but how he was like kind of flirting with all like the men and women at the college. I loved that so much. I'm not sure if that was like supposed to be that or if I just took that because I'm reading a queer love story right now. But I thought it was really cute and well done and just so good. I really want to see it again, and I'm sad that movie theaters cost so much money. Um, and then the idea of just like how much people bond on hating over things. This is like the scene where they're all at the Ozfest ballroom or whatever it's called. And there, a lot of them are all laughing at Elphaba for wearing the hat. Um, and yeah, and I remember reading an article a while ago that talked about how people bond over not liking something. Like it really just seems to bring people together. And later in the movie, the Oz, the wizard, also says that everybody loves a bad guy. Like everybody loves to hate on something together. It like really brings people together. And it's just so true. I mean, social media has shown that people love finding each other to hate on someone else or something else. And I feel like it's really hard to get your mind out of that way of thinking. Um, and really, it starts at the home. I mean, me and my partner, we try so hard to like call each other out when we're saying something negative and try to figure out a way to say it positive. And I mean, of course, there's time to vent. And of course, you're not going to like everything. Like, that's also totally a normal feeling. But to gang up with people to not like a person or a group or like a way of doing things is also not helpful or inclusive. Um, and then there's these lines shared between Galinda and the prince where the prince is like, wow, she doesn't care what anybody thinks of her. Like, that's amazing. And Galinda's like, no, of course she does. She just pretends not to. And God, I just love it. I love that movie. I love the movie so much. Um, but I just love this part because this is like what so many people feel, where it's like, how do you, like, what are you supposed to do? Even if you don't, I mean, I would love to know if anybody is out there who truly doesn't care what anybody thinks of them. I would love to know. Because I think there's, of course, everybody has that part in them. Like you want your genuine self to be liked by your community. You hope that you can connect with people. You hope that you can bond with your neighbors and like other moms at school or your friends, your coworkers, whatever. I just kind of said my own identity first. But to think that someone doesn't care at all what everyone thinks, um, they're just really good at pulling it off. And every study in the world has shown how important human connection is and that humans rely on it. We can't do just technology like this all the time. Listening to me talk in a podcast is not having a conversation with me. Um, and even though I very much love that you're here, having those conversations is just so important. But I mean, I don't know, go do chores, listen to me talk, and then maybe someday I can get paid to do this. Wouldn't that be swell? Okay, what am I doing? I'm off topic. I'm off topic. Um, the dance. Okay, okay. The dance of Galinda and Elphaba when like they're doing the dance and Galinda comes up and she also does the dance with Elphaba and then they like touch hands. And it was like kind of the first time of like a loving or nurturing like touch. And then Elphaba started like tearing up. Oh my gosh, I don't even. Okay. That part was just so beautiful because it just like goes to show that she had none of this like love and like human contact from people, not human contact, but like she didn't have this like love and like coming towards her and just like how meaningful that meant to her. And it was like I mean, it was actually a pretty big deal that Galinda was like, no, I'm not going to listen to all my minions. I'm going to go and like support you because you did this for me and whatever. When people are like, tell people they look great today. You have no idea what their morning was like, and that could literally make their day. And I just feel like those little things are so important. And yeah, that dance scene was just really beautiful. And then it also made me think about how people in power just can make so much more change. Um, because as Galinda was someone that like everyone looked up to, and so she was sitting there like, "This is what we're gonna do. You're my friend," and then everybody else liked her too. And so I know this is hard if you're a teacher or a service provider or a parent, and you're just trying to fight for inclusive practices. And it's just being shut down because admin or this district is just like saying no. Um, so I guess all of us need to go back to school, get our admin credentials, and then go be principals, and then force everyone to be inclusive, and we'll change the world one day at a time. Thanks for listening to me just talk about my notes. So choosing to hate things we can't control is a waste of time, unless you're going to make actionable steps to change those things. So I can't I knew this was going to happen. It's hard writing notes when you're like trying to watch a movie, but there was a scene that just really made me feel like just hating something is nothing, and it brings negativity to you, it brings negativity to others, and it's just wasteful. And I feel like all the time I'm talking to my kids right now about how not to be wasteful, how not to use a whole roll of toilet paper, or how not to open snacks and then not want them and throw them away. And we talk about being wasteful a lot. And so why are we going to be wasteful with our feelings and our time being mad or hating something when instead we can deal with it head on and learn about it and figure out a solution? So thanks for coming to that TED Talk. Keeping things caged up, we can choose what they, oh yeah, oh my gosh. Okay, so once they start wanting like to get all the animals out of Oz and they're like taking away their voices, putting them in cages, and they're like, look, if they grow up in cages, they'll be fine because they'll think that this is the way to go. Um, and how like this power of like, we want to stay in power. It's like this certain group wants to stay in power. So instead, we're going to take away their freedom and put them in cages, take away their voice. And then, eventually they'll just think that this is what they're supposed to do. And that's fine. And goes to show how knowledge is power, and we need to keep educating each other because a lot of these situations happening in the movie don't feel extremely far off to things happening in real life. So, learning from each other and learning to like coexist safely is important. Okay. Elphaba also said this great line where she said, like, you think I want to care this much? Like, do you know how much easier it would be for me not to? And I I guess that resonated a lot with me because I feel that way a lot, especially on social media, having to see so many people um, be so against inclusion or being just so ableist or sexist or racist. Um, and that's rough. And I think about, of course, I think about this all the time. Like, yeah, I could just be at home. I don't have to be creating content and trying to educate people and trying to make this like my life's mission. Um, but I guess it's my heart's desire. Oh, let's bring that all the way around. Oh my gosh, I have so many notes. Okay, I'm gonna go quicker. So wanting what you can't have with the it's kind of like the love triangle. No, that must have not been it. I can't remember why I wrote this down, but it's one of those like the grass is greener on the other side. Because I feel like Elphaba and Glenda are like kind of battling each other the whole time of like, who's making the right choices. Not that they're battling each other, but like which side do you feel like is making the right choices? Where do you feel like you stand in that area? Um, and I just love that line of like, I mean, they don't say this in the movie, but the grass is greener where you water it. Because I do know a lot of people who are like, if I could just get to here, or if I was like that, or if I could, it always seems better somewhere else. Um, but that's not the case. And a lot of times it's where you are and it's the journey of getting to your next goal that is really better than like just completing that goal. Um, okay. So then they show up to Oz and there's like, they see this whole intro of what the Oz is like and his story and just like how amazing he is. And I just th thought about all the brainwashing of like, we all look up to this person in power and he keeps telling everybody and he makes people fear him and he wants to keep all this power. And so if anything is hurting his power, he starts taking it away. And then, giving someone a common enemy. That was like a huge, huge thing of like how he basically runs his land. Ooh. Um, and the whole and like what he keeps telling people is like, I'm doing this to keep you safe. I want you to be happy. This is all for you. When in reality, he's the one that is happy and feels safe, um, by basically turning everybody on a common enemy, which he says this line to Elphaba and Galinda, but then Elphaba becomes that common enemy and or the real good enemy. And they just start, saying how she's wicked and just like the perspective of like now everybody is fearing her when what she's trying to do is like stand up for what she truly believes in. And of course Galinda fighting for what she believed in made me think a lot about how it is more common for disabled people to also identify as queer or also be people of color. And I mean, well, that's also like a socioeconomic thing, and we are not going to get into that right now. But how when you identify as a minority group already, you are already pushing back toward like to social norms. You're already pushing back social norms. And so when, which gives you the opportunity to be more open to other minority groups and other identities that are also pushing against societal norms. And and it made me think about that when Elphaba was like, "No, I'm not just gonna succumb to you and do what you want to do." When Galinda was like, all of her life, she was just trying to fit in and trying to be the best and have everyone look up to her. And that's what she always did. So if she went against the status quo, she wouldn't know if people would still love her. And that is like really scary to her, where Elphaba has already not feel loved and has already pushed against societal norms. And she's like, no, I'm not gonna just fall into your little like cookie cutter dream so you can stay in power when I know what you're doing is wrong. Um, which is like makes her, like I'm still gonna do this. This is right. Um, and then gosh, I also have this line, what would you do to be heard? Which I can't remember why I wrote that down. What would you do to be heard? I don't know. Um, and so then the ending, and I don't know if I'm going to get through this without crying. Which, by the way, I had no idea that this was a two-part movie. Like, I heard people saying, I can't wait for part two, and I was just like, there is no part two. Wicked's like one musical. Um, so I should have looked into that because I was sitting there the whole movie. I mean, I was like, wow, we haven't even got to define gravity yet. Like, this is crazy. Like, but I still was like, it's the whole movie. Like I was ready to sit through 3 more hours of that movie, and then it was done, and I was just shocked. So the climax, and this is a very like common thing to see in movies that the big climax of a movie is them going up the stairs because it's leading to like the big cinematic moment of like what's gonna happen. And so Glinda's going, not Glinda, well, I guess Glinda's going too, but Alphaba and Glinda are going up the stairs and they're doing this whole thing. Um, and then all the guards come in and she's singing Defying Gravity. And then what I love so much is that she like starts flying up, which I mean, they do this in the musical too, but I guess I've never thought of it like this. But that it's like she flies up. So it's like you think you're at the top of the building and then she like it's like shattering the glass ceiling is how I saw it. That she was like, no, no one's gonna bring me down. We're gonna do this. Um And I literally could not say any more lines of Defying Gravity because I'll just start sobbing. Oh man. Okay. Well, that's it. I'm not sure if this episode was a total waste of your time, and I'm sorry if it was, but I just had to talk about Wicked and just how great the symbolism is, the character development of like inclusiveness, identity, oh, all of it. It's so good. Oh my gosh. And I forgot to do my tarot cat reader. So let's do it now. I don't think I'm going to say a question. I think I'm just going to flip it over. Okay, we got Six of Wands and it's upside down. Six of Wands reversed. Lack of confidence, failure, solid. Confetti floats through the air, a victory wreath as your crown. Time to celebrate. Hooray for you. You did it. This is a moment of triumph and success. Be proud of what you have accomplished so far, but understand that there is more work to do. It is time to celebrate, but keep going. Lack of confidence. I definitely have been having a lot of dreams where things just keep happening and I'm like losing control. And these are not uncommon dreams for me. I know I put a lot on my plate because there's so much I want to do. And I just never feel like I have enough time, which I know I'm not the only one who feels that way. Um, I do have to say it is very hard to keep putting myself out there on social media. I do sometimes feel like I'm a little too old to do it, or I just, imposter syndrome is real. Um, but I just believe in it so much. So I guess I'm just gonna keep doing it and but don't forget to celebrate my wins. Okay, that is it. This went on way too long. Please go see Wicked. It is so good. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on the movie. Have a great night. Inclusion starts with you, and I just want to help. See you next week.